This video is all about combining exposure and response prevention therapy with acceptance and commitment therapy for dealing with and overcoming issues with anxiety. This is both very, very easy and at the same time very, very difficult. It's very easy to explain how to do exposure and response prevention and acceptance and commitment therapy. It's very difficult to actually implement them. So I'm going to talk a bit about both of those pieces. Exposure and response prevention is about exposing yourself to uncertainty or anxiety or whatever feeling it is you don't like, and then you prevent your typical compulsive response. For an example, the very first ERP exercise I ever did was to practice not checking the door lock when I left the apartment. What I had to do was leave the apartment like I normally would, so go out the door, and then I prevent my typical response was to lock the door and then check that it was locked and jiggle it and then maybe go back and check again. You go out the door, you don't respond with the typical compulsion, and then you walk away. There was a lot of anxiety that first time, but of course, over time, the anxiety became less and less. So there you go, very, very classic ERP exercise. Do the thing you normally do, but don't engage in the compulsion you would normally engage in. Acceptance and commitment therapy is quite similar to ERP. ACT is all about accepting the uncertainty and anxiety and other feelings you don't like that you're experiencing, and then recognizing that you are not those feelings or thoughts or urges or whatever they might be. So they're separate from you, they're things you experience, and then you commit to engaging in actions that align with your values and are going to make you healthy and happy over the long term. One way I found that acceptance and commitment therapy helped me was with all sorts of compulsions I had related to social anxiety. Say I was at a networking event, for example. If I was at a networking event in the past when I struggled with anxiety, I would maybe want to go and talk to some people, but immediately my mind would start to get very anxious. I'd start to wonder about all sorts of things like, is that the right person to talk to? Is there something stuck in my teeth? Do I smell? Is my fly down? Am I gonna say something stupid? Am I gonna embarrass myself? What if I talk to the wrong person when really I should be talking to somebody that's over there? Is that person gonna get bothered by me talking to them? Should I even be at this event? I should just take the free beer and run. My mind would flood with all sorts of uncertainties and compulsive judging and checking and avoidance, and it would just end in disaster. And of course, I probably wouldn't talk to anybody. I would leave, and then I would, go home and ruminate on how much I hate people and how I just don't get along with people and oh, I'm so alone. So the ACT approach would be about accepting all of those things that I'm experiencing. So it's not about trying to get rid of those anxieties, right? That doesn't work. That's probably something you've tried countless number of times. Trying to get rid of anxiety is the problem. So with an ACT approach, I would accept that, yeah, there's, maybe my fly is down, maybe there's something stuck in my teeth, maybe that person doesn't want to talk to me, I am wasting my time here, I should just leave, accept all those feelings and thoughts and urges to avoid and just shut down, and instead, while accepting all of that, look at what I actually value, look at what's going to be useful for me, look at what's going to make me happy, and then align my actions with that. So it would really be about accepting all of that. Say, oh, I'm gonna go talk to this person right now. I'm having all of these thoughts and feelings and urges to not talk to them because I'm afraid of all sorts of things happening. So I'm going to accept that I am afraid of those things, and I'm gonna walk up to that person, I'm gonna stick up my hand, I'm gonna smile, and I'm going to introduce myself. Yes, that's terrifying. Yes, there's maybe a lot of anxiety involved in that, but it's really about showing your brain that it doesn't have to be afraid. ERP is great for acute, very obvious compulsions. I often find it's used for tackling illness. It's used to tackle the very stereotypical compulsions that would classify as mental illness. The only catch with an approach like that is that you have to have an illness in order to start, tackling those compulsions. It's all about after something becomes excessive, after something is bothering you, after something is distressing you, then you tackle it and you get rid of it. But I find with ERP, there's no follow-up. So you got rid of the compulsion, you don't classify as a mental illness anymore, then what? I find that acceptance and commitment therapy is useful because it answers the then what. Acceptance and commitment therapy ultimately is about recognizing what you value, what are the things in your life that are going to make you happy and healthy, and then doing those things. And so there's more of a focus there on where you're going. With acceptance and commitment therapy, you can keep doing it and keep practicing those skills for the rest of your life. So exposure and response prevention is very much about, I'm doing something that classifies in the realm of illness, I'm gonna cut that out. Whereas acceptance and commitment therapy, it's a bit more about, okay, yeah, you're gonna cut out the compulsion, but you're cutting out the compulsion so you can do the things that are gonna make you happy and healthy. So I find acceptance and commitment therapy is a really great follow-up to exposure and response prevention. When we're sick, we totally wanna deal with the sickness, but then we really want to make sure we're not getting sick in the future. We're not just hanging out on the edge of relapse. On my own personal journey of recovery and when I'm working with clients, I find that the techniques of acceptance and commitment therapy are really useful for the more long-term journey of maintaining and constantly improving great mental health. If you want to try out cutting out compulsions, a really great place to start is with your cell phone and learning not to react to the urge to check it. I did a video on this, you can check it out. It's called a super simple mental fitness exercise. That's a great place to begin. The reason we always start with a very simple exercise, whether it's acceptance and commitment therapy or exposure and response prevention, is because cutting out compulsions is extremely difficult. When I described both ERP and ACT there, in a sense they're very, very simple. You accept the stuff in your head, you don't engage in compulsions. Instead, you engage in activities that align with your values and are aligned authentically with who you are and are going to make you healthy and happy in the long term. Very straightforward. Accept stuff in your head, do the things that make you happy and healthy. It's very difficult to do in practice. Building great mental health and fitness is no different than building great physical health and fitness. Both are affected by a variety of contextual factors. There's genetics, environment, socioeconomic status, learned factors, and personal choice. Anybody that wants to get into great physical shape has to consider all of those factors because they're going to have to make changes in all of them or overcome barriers in all of them in order to meet their fitness goals. The exact same is true when it comes to mental health and fitness. So if you're doing ERP or ACT, ideally combined, you still have to factor in all of these other changes that you're going to have to make if you want to succeed with them. Many of the changes you make won't be focused on the things that cause you anxiety or the overt compulsions or things that a textbook says are related to the mental illness you're dealing with. Just like if somebody has heart problems, so they're going to start running to improve their heart health, most of the changes they make won't have anything to actually do with running. They've got to start to look at how do they make time for running? How do they buy equipment for running? How do they change what they eat so they're supporting running? How do they sleep differently? All sorts of things get wrapped up in just making a simple change like starting to run. That's exactly what's going to happen too when you start to make the changes to build better mental health. You can't avoid making those changes if you want to succeed with improving your mental health. ERP and ACT are all about experiencing feelings, often feelings that we've spent our entire life trying not to feel, which of course leads to us feeling them all of the time. One thing I like about acceptance and commitment therapy is that it does offer some additional tools for learning how to relate differently with those feelings. So particularly through helping you recognize that those feelings don't define you, that you don't have to take them literally, that the thoughts in your head are not you. Ultimately, these approaches are about learning how to feel things. They're about learning how to embrace anxiety, and that through embracing anxiety, you actually experience anxiety much less. You can actually use anxiety as something that can take you where you want to go, as opposed to a barrier or a cage that locks you in and prevents you from doing the things you want to do. To finish off here, I'm going to share one of the things that I learned from my journey with exposure and response prevention and acceptance and commitment therapy. They really helped me see that anxiety doesn't have to be this crippling disability. In fact, they helped me approach anxiety just like any other health and fitness issue. If somebody can't run a kilometer because they've never practiced running in their life, that doesn't mean they have a disability. It's totally within their power to learn how to run. But if they've never run, they physically probably won't be able to run. It's going to be biologically impossible. And they will experience all sorts of negative symptoms because of that. If they're forced into a situation where they have to run, like they're walking down the street one day and suddenly a pack of velociraptors runs after them, it's going to be an intense experience for them. If they're lucky enough to escape, it's going to be one of the most painful. They are going to be sore for weeks afterwards. They are never going to want to do that running thing ever again. The same is true for somebody struggling with mental health and struggling with anxiety. If they're suddenly forced into a situation, whether it's at work, at school, in relationships where they're under intense pressure and they experience a lot of anxiety, they are going to exhibit all sorts of negative symptoms because they've spent their entire life practicing not feeling anxiety and trying not to feel it, trying to get rid of it. That's why ERP and ACT are all about learning how to have these feelings and then make healthy decisions. If you haven't been practicing experiencing things like anxiety and then making healthy decisions, it is not at all surprising or weird or abnormal that you can't handle anxiety. If you don't practice handling anxiety, you can't handle anxiety. Just like if you don't practice running, you can't run. If you're doing ERP or ACT or both of them combined, all of the tips that I have in my Beat OCD tips playlist are going to be useful for supporting succeeding with either of those or both of them combined. Building great mental health and fitness is just like running, so talk to other people who are running these super long distances, who are making all the changes in their life to support great mental health and fitness. Enjoy giving uncertainty and anxiety massive hugs and all the best with doing things that are actually going to make you healthy and happy.